Hello, my sweet summer children. Welcome to Creepy Westeros and Essos and everywhere in the Game of Thrones universe. All of October, we'll be diving back into the mysterious and creepy comings and goings of Westeros. I've linked all of my CreepTober videos on one playlist for your easy access and all your spooky needs. Today, we will be visiting probably the creepiest place in Westeros, and that's the north, beyond the wall and beneath a weirwood, Bloodraven's cave. We won't just be visiting Bloodraven's cave though. We're going to be visiting an almost identical place to Bloodraven's cave in this video, and you might be surprised at what that is and what that could mean. So Bran travels beyond the wall, through the haunted forest, braving the winter snows and the White Walkers, and he ends up at a cave beneath a weirwood. In the TV show Game of Thrones, when we see Bran go into this cave, we see weirwood roots and fog, some bones, a man in a tree, but the cave is much more scarier than that and much more mysterious. The caves were timeless, vast, silent. They were home to more than 70 living singers and the bones of thousands dead, and extended far below the hollow hill. Men should not go wandering in this place, Leaf warned them. The river you hear is swift and black and flows down and down to a sunless sea, and there are passages that go even deeper, bottomless pits and sudden shafts, forgotten ways that lead to the very center of the earth. Even my people have not explored them all, and we have lived here for 1,000 of your man years. There is a river in the cave, black and swift. In this river are fish with no eyes. They're blind fish. As a raven, he flew with the murder, circling the hill at sunset, watching for foes, feeling the icy touch of the air. As Hodor, he explored the caves. He found chambers full of bones, shafts that plunged deep into the earth, a place where the skeletons of gigantic bats hung upside down from the ceiling. He even crossed the slender stone bridge that arched over the abyss and discovered more passages and chambers on the far side. One was full of singers, enthroned like Brendan in nests of weirwood roots that wove under and through and around their bodies. Most of them looked dead to him, but as he crossed in front of them, their eyes would open and follow the light of his torch. Seated on his throne of roots in a great cavern, half corpse and half tree, Lord Brendan seemed less a man than some ghastly statue made of twisted wood, old bone and rotted wool. The only thing that looked alive in the pale ruin that was his face was his one red eye, burning like the last coal in a dead fire, surrounded by twisted roots and tatters of leathery white skin hanging off a yellowed skull. Okay, so not only is the cave full of bones and dead people and children of the forest and thrones of roots, Bloodraven is there, and he's much more disgusting looking than what he is portrayed on TV. On TV, he looks like Mr. fucking Rogers and some roots, but in the books, he's like half a corpse, and he's creepy, and he makes being the last Greenseer not so appealing. But that's another video. So Bloodraven's cave is basically a hollow hill, a secret tree town of the children of the forest. But there is something very similar to Bloodraven's cave that may be a huge clue. The crypts of Winterfell. It's said that the crypts of Winterfell are as old as Winterfell itself. Legend says that Brandon the Builder raised Winterfell after the generation-long winter known as the Long Night, to become the stronghold of his descendants, the Kings of Winter. The castle itself is peculiar in that the Starks did not level the ground when laying down the foundations and walls of the castle. Very likely, this reveals that the castle was built in pieces over the years, rather than being planned as a single structure. Some scholars suspect that it was once a complex of linked ring forts, though the centuries have eradicated almost all evidence of this. To the trained eye, the architecture of Winterfell is an amalgam of many different eras, and its vastness not only encompasses buildings, but open areas as well. In fact, 3 acres alone are given over to an ancient godswood, where legend tells us Brandon the Builder once prayed to his gods. Whether this is true or not, the antiquity of the grove cannot be contested, and the godswood no doubt benefits from the hot springs that are contained within it, protecting the trees from the worst of the winter's chill. Indeed, the presence of the hot springs, which pepper the land around Winterfell, may be the chief reason why the first men initially settled there. One can easily imagine the value that a ready source of water, and hot water at that, would have had in the depths of a northern winter. Okay, so this quote says that the ground was not leveled when Winterfell was built, and that Winterfell was built over time and added onto. Also, that Winterfell has natural hot springs, and scholars believe the ancient Starks, the first men, picked this spot because of these hot springs. But we know that the first men weren't actually the first men. So where Winterfell is now was likely inhabited by the children of the forest. Why wouldn't the children of the forest want to inhabit a place with a natural hot spring that feeds an ancient weirwood? I mean, they would want to inhabit that, right? But the children don't live in castles. They live in secret tree towns, underground, which is probably why the Starks didn't level the ground. So it is said that the last hero sought out the children of the forest, and that was the turning point of the long night. After this long night, Brandon the Builder picks Winterfell as the spot to build his family's fortress. Winterfell may be where the last hero actually found the children of the forest, but not Winterfell as you know it now. Winterfell as it would have been 8,000 years ago. It would have been a secret tree town, which is still there today. Let's compare the crypts of Winterfell to Bloodraven's cave. I mean, it's kind of eye-opening. When Bran first enters the cave, it's described much like the entrance of the crypts of Winterfell. The way was cramped and twisty, and so low that Hodor soon was crouching. Bran hunched down as best he could, but even so, the top of his head was soon scraping and bumping against the ceiling. The Crypts of Winterfell entrance is described exactly the same, even down to Hodor having to duck down. The steps were narrow, so they had to climb in single file. Osha led. Behind came Hodor, with Bran crouched low on his back so his head wouldn't hit the ceiling. The Crypts of Winterfell also contain the bones of 1,000 kings, and Bloodraven's cave contains the bones of 1,000 singers, or children of the forest. But the special ones, the Green Seers, seem to be in weirwood thrones. One was full of singers, enthroned like Brendan in nests of weirwood roots that wove under and through and around their bodies. It's the same with the Crypts of Winterfell. All the Starks are buried down there, but the special ones, the Kings of Winter and the Lords of Winterfell, get statues. Shadows moved and lurched. Flickering light touched the stones underfoot and brushed against a long procession of granite pillars that marched ahead 2 by 2. Into the dark, between the pillars, the dead sat on their stone thrones. So we have throned dead in both the cave and the Crypts of Winterfell. So when Bran is in the cave with Bloodraven and the children, Bran says it's warm down there. After the bone-grinding cold of the lands beyond the wall, the caves were blessedly warm. And when the chill crept out of the rock, the singers would light fires to drive it off again. Interestingly, when Theon takes Lady Dustin down into the Crypts of Winterfell, Theon says this. He had always thought of the crypts as cold, and so they seemed in summer. But now, as they descended, their air grew warmer. The warmth is just another drop in the bucket of comparison to Bloodraven's caves in the Crypts of Winterfell. The Crypts of Winterfell also are huge and have sections that are forgotten and unexplored. The vault was cavernous, longer than Winterfell itself, and Jon had told him once that there were other levels underneath, vaults even deeper and darker where the old kings were buried. This is so similar to Bloodraven's cave. Bran describes it as vast and timeless. Leaf warns him about exploring it. And there are passages that go even deeper, bottomless pits and sudden shafts, forgotten ways that lead to the very center of the earth. Bloodraven's cave has a black river that flows through it. Right in front of Winterfell's heart tree is a pool of black water. And of course, the hot springs. The similarities are endless, but something else jumps out at me. It's that Hodor was afraid of the crypts, so afraid that he refused to take Bran down there. He doesn't refuse to take Bran anywhere else but the crypts. When I woke, I told him to take me down, to see if Father was truly there. At first, he didn't know what I was saying, but I got him to the steps by telling him to go here and go there. Only then, he wouldn't go down. He just stood on the top step and said Hodor, like he was scared of the dark. But I had a torch. It made me so mad, I almost gave him a swat in the head like old Nan is always doing. So why? Why was Hodor afraid to go into the crypts? Did it remind him of something? Did it remind him of how his death might come in a place very similar to those crypts? Did he think he might have to hold that ironwood door to the crypts? Did he think that was his last day when Bran asked him to go down there? Because in the show, Hodor dies in Bloodraven's cave, holding a door. The crypts of Winterfell have a giant ironwood door. Something about the crypts had Hodor shook. I am 100% sure that the crypts of Winterfell were and still could be home to some of the children of the forest. We know from Bran's vision in A Dance with Dragons that the children and the First Men were at the Heart Tree in Winterfell sacrificing a captive together. Bran sees this. He even tastes the blood of this sacrifice. Then, as he watched, a bearded man forced a captive down onto his knees before the heart tree. A white-haired woman stepped toward them through a drift of dark red leaves, a bronze sickle in her hand. "No," said Bran. "No, don't." But they couldn't hear him, no more than his father had. The woman grabbed the captive by the hair, hooked the sickle round his throat and slashed, and through the mist of centuries, the broken boy could only watch as the man's feet drummed against the earth. But as his life flowed out of him in a red tide, Brandon Stark could taste the blood. White-haired woman seems to be a child of the forest. The World of Ice and Fire app, which is said to be canon, says she is a First Man priestess. Now, we know that Snowy Locks is a child of the forest that Bran comes in contact with in the cave. They call her Snowy Locks because she has white hair. So this may be a common trait of the children of the forest. But anyway, the point is, the First Men were in Winterfell, sacrificing at the Heart Tree in Winterfell, and the children, or the Night Queen, was there too. Children don't live in castles, they live in hollow hills and secret tree towns. So while Brandon the Builder was raising the first stones of Winterfell's first keep and sacrificing to the Heart Tree, the children were there. They weren't living in the castles, they were living underfoot, coexisting with the Starks, and they could still be down there. It is also in the crypts of Winterfell that Bran's gifts are fully awakened. Here, in the chill, damp darkness of the tomb, his third eye had finally opened. He could reach Summer whenever he wanted, and once he had even touched Ghost and talked to Jon. Now, why would Bran's gifts awaken in the crypts of Winterfell? Because of the weirwood and its roots. When Winterfell is burned by Ramsay Bolton, Bran says this: "The stone is strong," Bran told himself. "The roots of the trees go deep. And under the ground the kings of winter sit their thrones. So long as those remained, Winterfell remained. It was not dead, just broken, like me," he thought. The crypts of Winterfell are surrounded by the roots of the weirwoods. The bodies of the dead Starks have been feeding it for centuries. The crypts are powerful and could potentially still be housing living children of the forest in the much deeper levels. Now, Bloodraven's cave was warded by ancient magic. Ancient magic kept the dead from entering it. This is the same in the books. The Winterfell's crypts are much like Bloodraven's cave, so the crypts of Winterfell may be warded with the same magic. Now, what could that mean for Season 8? Well, let me explain. The White Walkers are moving south from the wall. Winterfell is in their path. They would reach Winterfell before they reach King's Landing. But from visions of the House of the Undying and foreshadowing from Season 7, it seems that the Night King will somehow make it past Winterfell and to King's Landing. All of the main characters are in Winterfell, so how is it that the Night King will make it past Winterfell and the main characters still be alive unless they're all gonna die? So does the Night King just beeline for King's Landing and say, forget Winterfell, I know I can't take it? Probably not. So I've been saying that I think there will be at least 2 encounters of the main cast with the White Walkers, one in Winterfell and one in King's Landing. I think they will fall on Winterfell, but Winterfell will not fall. We have seen it before through Bran. Winterfell burned by Ramsay, and then Bran sees it. Yeah, it's scorched a little bit. It has some burn marks on it, but it's not ruined. The stone is strong, and as long as the Stone Kings remain, so does Winterfell. This was likely a clue. This was likely a foreshadowing that when the Night King descends on Winterfell and tries to destroy it, he won't be able to. Yeah, he might burn it. It might be scorched, but the Starks and many people will be safe within the crypts of Winterfell. The Night King won't even know it. This will allow them to flank the Night King and his army. It will allow fragile people who aren't fighters to remain safe within the crypts of Winterfell. The secret tunnels and vaults will allow them to leave Winterfell should they need to. But Bran Stark will be stronger than ever under the weirwood roots in the darkness of the crypts of Winterfell. There he sat, listening to the hoarse whispers of his teacher. Never fear the darkness, Bran. The Lord's words were accompanied by a faint rustling of wood and leaf, a slight twisting of his head. The strongest trees are rooted in the darkest places of the earth. Darkness will be your cloak, your shield, your mother's milk. Darkness will make you strong. I definitely think the Crypts of Winterfell, as creepy as they are, will play a pivotal role in Season 8. But what do you think about the creepy crypts in Bloodraven's creepy cave? If you want even more information on the Crypts of Winterfell and how I've compared them to other stories that George got inspiration from, and I will link those videos for you below. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks to everyone that supports me on Patreon. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please click that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and join the Sweet Summer family. Okay, my sweet summer children, have a good day.